Amelia Bennett stood by the window of the bustling St. Anne's Hospital, watching as the first rays of dawn painted the sky with hues of pink and orange. The soft hum of medical equipment and distant footsteps echoed through the hallways. She took a deep breath, adjusting her crisp white nurse's uniform, her name badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Another day, another chance to make a difference, she whispered to herself. As one of the most skilled nurses in the hospital, Amelia was known for her compassion and dedication. Her patients adored her, often leaving heartfelt notes and small tokens of gratitude. However, not everyone appreciated her talents. "Amelia, the new interns will be arriving today. Make sure they don't get in the way," said Dr. Richard Coleman, passing by without a glance. "Of course, Dr. Coleman," Amelia replied, masking her irritation with a polite smile. She could sense the subtle undercurrents of tension among some of the staff. Whispers in the break room would cease when she entered, and certain colleagues avoided eye contact. She brushed it off, focusing on her duties. Walking towards the nurses' station, she greeted her friend and colleague, Nurse Lisa Thompson. "Morning, Lisa. Ready for another hectic day?" "Always, ma'am." "Did you hear about the strange cases we've been getting lately?" Lisa asked, concern etched on her face. "Strange cases?" "Patients coming in with unexplained symptoms. Some think it's a new virus. Others say it's something else." Amelia frowned. "Well, whatever it is, we'll handle it. Our patients depend on us." As the day unfolded, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Small incidents, a misplaced chart, a faulty pump began to pile up. She noticed glances exchanged between Dr. Coleman and a few other doctors, their conversations hushed whenever she approached. In the afternoon, during a staff meeting, the hospital director addressed the team. "We've had an increase in patient complaints and some unusual occurrences on the wards. I urge everyone to stay vigilant and report any irregularities immediately." Amelia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She sensed that a storm was brewing, but she couldn't yet see its form. The following day, Amelia was assigned to the intensive care unit. As she reviewed her patient list, she noticed a new admission, Mr. Jonathan Reed, a prominent businessman admitted overnight with severe respiratory distress. "He's a high-profile patient," Lisa whispered. "Be careful. Dr. Coleman is personally overseeing his case." Amelia nodded, her focus sharpening. Entering Mr. Reed's room, she found him struggling to breathe, his face pale and clammy. "Mr. Reed, I'm Nurse Bennett. I'm here to help you," she said softly. He managed a weak smile. "Thank you." As she adjusted his oxygen mask and checked his vitals, she noticed his foredrip was nearly empty. She prepared a new saline bag, double-checking the dosage. Just as she was about to administer it, Dr. Coleman stormed into the room. "What do you think you're doing?" he snapped. Startled, Amelia replied, "I'm replacing his 4 fluids, doctor. His levels are low." Dr. Coleman's eyes narrowed. "Did I authorize that? You're overstepping your boundaries." "Doctor, it's standard procedure to maintain hydration. His chart indicates." "Enough," he interrupted. "From now on, you are not to make any decisions regarding Mr. Reed without my explicit instructions." "Understood?" Amelia felt a flush of embarrassment and anger. "Understood," she said quietly. As she exited the room, she could feel the eyes of other staff members on her, whispers trailing in her wake. Later that evening, she overheard a conversation between Dr. Coleman and Nurse Abigail, a colleague who often sided with the doctors. "She's becoming a liability," Dr. Coleman said. "We can't have nurses making unilateral decisions, especially not her." "Perhaps it's time we report her," Abigail suggested. Amelia's heart sank. She had always acted in the best interest of her patients. Why was she being singled out? Returning home after her shift, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The first seeds of doubt and injustice had been sown. The following days were a blur of tension and hostility. Amelia noticed a distinct shift in the way her colleagues interacted with her. Conversations died down when she entered a room, and she received fewer assignments from the senior staff. Even Nurse Lisa, her closest friend at the hospital, seemed distant, her usual warm demeanor replaced by a cautious politeness. One morning, as Amelia was checking on Mr. Reed's condition, she noticed his breathing had worsened. His oxygen levels were plummeting. Instinctively, she reached for the nearest monitor to call for immediate assistance. But before she could act, Dr. Coleman barged into the room. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "His oxygen levels are dropping, Dr. Coleman. We need to—" "I'm aware of his condition, Nurse Bennett," he snapped, cutting her off. "This is why I told you not to interfere." Amelia's stomach clenched. "I wasn't interfering, doctor. I was following protocol." Dr. Coleman glared at her, his face a mask of contempt. "Protocol? Or trying to make me look incompetent?" She froze. This was no longer about patient care. It was personal. Later that day, the situation worsened. Mr. Reed's condition deteriorated rapidly, and despite their best efforts, he passed away during the night. The loss weighed heavily on Amelia. She had been his nurse, and though she had done everything within her power, she felt the crushing guilt of his death. The next morning, as Amelia prepared for her shift, she received an unexpected call from hospital administration. She was summoned to an urgent meeting with the hospital director. Sitting in the director's office, Amelia felt the walls closing in around her. Across the desk sat Dr. Coleman, Nurse Abigail, and two members of the hospital board. The director, a stern woman named Mrs. Hathaway, folded her hands and addressed Amelia with a cold formality. "Miss Bennett, it has come to our attention that there were irregularities in your treatment of Mr. Reed before his passing. We've received reports suggesting that your actions may have contributed to his death." Amelia's heart dropped. "That's not true. I followed protocol, and I notified Dr. Coleman immediately when his condition worsened." Dr. Coleman cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. "There were several instances where Nurse Bennett acted outside of her duties. We cannot afford such recklessness, especially with high-profile patients." The accusation hit Amelia like a punch to the chest. "I was trying to save him." Mrs. Hathaway's eyes were cold as ice. "Be that as it may, we are launching a formal investigation. Effective immediately, you were suspended pending the outcome." Amelia sat in stunned silence. She had devoted years of her life to St. Anne's Hospital, always putting her patients first. Now, she was being accused of negligence and stripped of her duties without a chance to defend herself. As she left the meeting, the weight of the injustice pressed down on her. Her colleagues avoided eye contact, whispers filled the corridors, and she felt utterly alone. Even Lisa couldn't meet her gaze as Amelia passed by. That evening, Amelia returned home, her thoughts a swirling storm of disbelief and despair. The pain of being unjustly blamed, coupled with the suspicion that there was something deeper at play, gnawed at her. Why had Dr. Coleman turned on her so suddenly? Why were her actions being questioned when she had done everything right? As she sat in the quiet of her small apartment, she realized that this was not just about Mr. Reed. There was something larger happening, and somehow she had become the target. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but who was behind this, and why? The seeds of doubt planted by Dr. Coleman and Nurse Abigail had grown into full-fledged accusations. Amelia could feel the walls closing in, but she knew one thing: she could not allow this to break her. She would fight to clear her name, no matter the cost. A week had passed since Amelia's suspension, and the weight of the accusations pressed heavily on her. Determined to clear her name, she began reviewing her notes and recollecting every detail surrounding Mr. Reed's treatment. Something wasn't adding up. One afternoon, as she was sifting through her personal copies of medical records, she received an unexpected message from an unknown number. "We need to talk." Meet me at the cafe on 5th Avenue at 6 p.m. I have information that can help you. Amelia's heartbeat quickened. This could be the break she needed. At 6 p.m. sharp, she entered the dimly lit cafe, her eyes scanning the room. A figure in a hooded jacket waved her over to a secluded booth. "Who are you?" she asked cautiously. The figure lowered the hood, revealing Nurse Lisa's familiar face. "Lisa? Why all the secrecy?" Lisa glanced around nervously. "I shouldn't be seen talking to you. They're watching everyone." "Who? What is going on?" Amelia pressed. Lisa leaned in. "I found out that Dr. Coleman and some of the board members are involved in a scheme. They're accepting funds from pharmaceutical companies to push experimental drugs on patients without proper consent." Amelia's eyes widened. "That explains the unusual cases and sudden patient declines. But why frame me?" "They needed a scapegoat," Lisa replied solemnly. "Someone to blame if things went wrong. Your impeccable record and your background made you the perfect target." Amelia felt a surge of anger and betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," Lisa admitted, tears welling up. "But I couldn't let them ruin you. I found evidence, emails, transaction records. If we can get this to the authorities, we can expose them." A flicker of hope ignited within Amelia. "Thank you, Lisa. We need to act fast." Just then, two men in suits entered the cafe, their eyes locking onto Amelia and Lisa. "We have to go now," Lisa whispered urgently. They slipped out the back door, the men in pursuit. Racing through the alleyways, they managed to lose their followers and took refuge in a crowded subway station. "That was too close," Amelia panted. "We're not safe yet," Lisa cautioned. "They'll do anything to keep us silent." Over the next few days, they worked in secret, compiling all the evidence they could find. Just as they were preparing to present their findings to a trusted law enforcement contact, Amelia received a call from an unknown number. A cold, menacing voice spoke. "You should have stayed quiet, Miss Bennett. Now, there will be consequences." The line went dead. Fear gripped her, but she refused to back down. That night, as Amelia returned to her apartment, she found the door slightly ajar. Inside, her home was ransacked. Papers were scattered, and her laptop was missing. "They're trying to intimidate me," she told Lisa over the phone. "But we can't stop now." However, without the physical evidence, their case was weakening. Despair began to set in. The false hope that they were close to exposing the truth was slipping away, and the forces against them seemed insurmountable. The city was cloaked in darkness as Amelia navigated the labyrinth of streets leading back to St. Anne's Hospital. Rain drizzled steadily, casting a shimmering veil over the neon lights that flickered in the damp night. Clutching her umbrella tightly, she felt a mix of fear and determination coursing through her veins. Earlier that day, after discovering her apartment had been ransacked and the evidence stolen, Amelia and Lisa knew they needed a new plan. They met with Detective Mark Harris in a secluded corner of a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. "Without the physical evidence, our case is weak," Harris admitted, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "We need something concrete to bring them down." Amelia glanced at Lisa, her eyes reflecting the weight of their predicament. "What if we can get access to the hospital's internal records? There must be digital footprints, emails, transaction logs." Lisa hesitated. "The security is tight, but there might be a way. The eye technician, Ben, owes me a favor. I can ask him for help." Detective Harris leaned forward. "It's risky. If you're caught, things could get much worse." Amelia squared her shoulders. "They've taken everything from me. I won't let them get away with this." Under the cover of night, they devised a plan. Lisa would distract the night staff while Amelia snuck into the records room. Ben agreed to assist remotely, providing her with temporary access codes. As Amelia approached the hospital, memories flooded back, countless hours spent within its walls, saving lives, comforting families. Now, she felt like an outsider, a trespasser in a place she once considered a second home. Slipping through a side entrance, she moved swiftly along the dimly lit corridors, avoiding the gaze of security cameras whenever possible. Her heart pounded in her chest, each footstep echoing loudly in her ears. Reaching the records room, she found the door locked with a keypad. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from Ben. "Codes are active. You have 5 minutes." She entered the code, and the door clicked open. Inside, rows of servers hummed quietly. Logging into a terminal, she inserted a flash drive Ben had prepared, designed to bypass certain security protocols. Files began to download patient records, email correspondences, financial transactions. As the progress bar inched forward, Amelia's anxiety grew. She glanced at her watch. Time was running out. Suddenly, footsteps approached outside. Voices drifted through the door. "I thought I heard something," a man's voice said. Holding her breath, Amelia ducked behind a cabinet, her pulse racing. The door handle rattled. "It's probably nothing," another voice replied. "Come on, our shift's almost over." The footsteps receded. Exhaling slowly, she returned to the terminal. The download was complete. She ejected the flash drive and prepared to leave. But as she turned, the silhouette of Dr. Coleman loomed in the doorway. "Going somewhere, Miss Bennett?" he asked, his tone icy. Amelia's blood ran cold. "Dr. Coleman, I was just—" "Save your excuses," he snapped, stepping into the room. 2 security guards appeared behind him, blocking any escape. "You've become quite the nuisance," he continued, eyeing the flash drive in her hand. "I knew you'd try something like this." Amelia backed away slowly. "The truth will come out. You can't keep hiding behind lies." Dr. Coleman chuckled darkly. "You overestimate your position. No one will believe a disgraced nurse over a respected physician." He signaled to the guards. "Take her to the basement. We need to have a more private discussion." As they seized her arms, Amelia struggled. "Let me go. This is illegal." But her cries fell on deaf ears. They escorted her through a series of restricted corridors, descending deeper into the bowels of the hospital. The sterile environment gave way to dimly lit, neglected hallways. They pushed her into a small, windowless room. The walls were lined with old medical equipment, and a single flickering bulb cast eerie shadows. Dr. Coleman entered, closing the door behind him. "You should have heeded my warnings," he said, his face half hidden in shadow. Amelia's mind raced. She needed to stall, to find a way out. "Why are you doing this? How many patients have suffered because of you?" He sneered. "Sacrifices are necessary for progress. The pharmaceutical advancements we're making will save countless lives." "At what cost?" she shot back. "Human lives aren't expendable." He stepped closer, his eyes cold. "Moral high ground won't save you now. Hand over the flash drive." She gripped it tightly. "No." He sighed. "Very well." Turning to the guards, he ordered, "Make sure she doesn't cause any more trouble." As they advanced toward her, the door burst open. Detective Harris and a team of officers flooded the room. "Step away from her," Harris commanded, his weapon drawn. Dr. Coleman recoiled in surprise. "What is the meaning of this?" "We received an anonymous tip about illegal activities happening here," Harris said, moving to Amelia's side. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, and obstruction of justice." Amelia's knees felt weak with relief. Lisa appeared behind the officers, her expression a mix of worry and determination. "You okay?" she asked Amelia. "I am now," Amelia replied, her voice shaky. Dr. Coleman glared at them. "You think this changes anything? My lawyers will have me out by morning," Harris smirked. "Perhaps, but with the evidence we've gathered, the court of public opinion won't be on your side." As the officers secured Dr. Coleman and the guards, Amelia handed the flash drive to Harris. "This has all the evidence, emails, transaction records, everything." He nodded appreciatively. "This will be invaluable." Outside, dawn was breaking, the first light of day chasing away the night shadows. Media vans and reporters were already assembling, news spreading quickly about the scandal at St. Anne's Hospital. As Dr. Coleman was escorted out in handcuffs, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. He maintained a stoic facade, but a flicker of panic crossed his eyes. Amelia and Lisa stood together, watching the scene unfold. "We did it," Lisa whispered, a hint of amazement in her voice. Amelia took a deep breath, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. "We couldn't have done it without each other." A reporter approached them. "Miss Bennett, care to comment on the events of tonight?" Amelia glanced at Lisa, then faced the reporter. "The actions of a few do not reflect the dedication of the many healthcare professionals who genuinely care for their patients. I hope this serves as a reminder that no one is above the law." As they walked away from the chaos, Amelia knew there was still a long road ahead. Rebuilding her reputation, healing from the trauma, but for the first time in weeks, she felt hopeful. But in the shadows, a figure watched them. Nurse Abigail's eyes followed their movements, a subtle smirk playing on her lips. Pulling out her phone, she sent a cryptic message. "Coleman is down. Proceed as planned." Unaware of the lingering threat, Amelia and Lisa made their way home, believing the nightmare was over. In the days following Dr. Coleman's arrest, Amelia began the process of rebuilding her life. The hospital administration, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, reinstated her position and publicly apologized for the wrongful suspension. Colleagues who once avoided her now offered support, and patients greeted her with warmth and gratitude. However, the lingering unease persisted. Dr. Coleman's final warning echoed in her mind, and the mysterious actions of Nurse Abigail remained unexplained. Determined to ensure that all those involved were held accountable, Amelia delved deeper into the hospital's recent history. One afternoon, while organizing patient files, she noticed irregularities in the records of those who had mysteriously deteriorated under Dr. Coleman's care. Several files were missing critical information, and others had been altered. She suspected that Dr. Coleman couldn't have orchestrated everything alone. Amelia sought out Lisa. "I think there's more to this than we realized," she said, spreading the files across the table in the break room. Lisa examined the documents. "These omissions are too consistent to be accidental. Someone else must be involved." "Exactly," Amelia agreed. "And I have a feeling Nurse Abigail knows more than she's letting on." They decided to keep a close eye on Abigail. Over the next few days, Amelia noticed Abigail frequently disappearing into the old wing of the hospital, a section closed off for renovations. Curious, Amelia followed her discreetly one evening. Navigating the dim corridors, she heard muffled voices behind a heavy door. Peering through a small window, she saw Abigail speaking with a man in a lab coat she didn't recognize. They discussed transferring the remaining samples before authorities could discover them. Amelia's heart raced. She recorded a snippet of their conversation on her phone before retreating quietly. She met with Detective Harris the next morning. "There's still illegal activity happening at the hospital," she explained, showing him the recording. "I believe Nurse Abigail is involved in continuing Dr. Coleman's work," Harris frowned. "This is troubling. We need concrete evidence to act." "Then we'll get it," Amelia declared. That night, Amelia and Lisa returned to the old wing, this time with Harris and a small team of undercover officers. They waited until Abigail and the unknown man arrived. As they began packing boxes labeled with cryptic codes, Harris signaled his team. They moved in swiftly. "Freeze! You're under arrest," Harris commanded. Abigail's eyes widened with shock and anger. "You meddling fools!" She spat. You have no idea what you've disrupted." The man beside her attempted to flee but was quickly apprehended. Amelia approached Abigail. "Why, Abigail? Why betray your patients and colleagues?" she asked, a mix of sadness and disbelief in her voice. Abigail sneered. "You're so naive, Amelia. This was never about the patients. It was about innovation, profit, and being on the cutting edge of medicine. Dr. Coleman understood that." "At the cost of innocent lives?" Amelia retorted. "Collateral damage," Abigail replied coldly. As the officers led Abigail and her accomplice away, Harris turned to Amelia. "Thanks to you, we've dismantled the remaining parts of their operation." Amelia nodded, relief washing over her. "I just want the hospital to be a safe place for everyone again. With people like you here, I have no doubt it will be," Harris said with a reassuring smile. With the conspiracy fully exposed and all responsible parties brought to justice, St. Anne's Hospital began the arduous process of healing. Policies were reviewed and strengthened, ensuring greater transparency and patient safety. The administration established a committee, including Amelia, to oversee the implementation of ethical practices. One sunny morning, as Amelia walked through the hospital gardens, she was approached by Mrs. Hathaway, the hospital director. "Amelia, I wanted to thank you personally," Mrs. Hathaway said, her tone sincere. "Your courage not only saved lives but also helped restore integrity to our institution." "Thank you," Amelia replied. "I only did what was necessary. Nevertheless, we are in your debt. We'd like to offer you the position of head nurse. Your leadership is exactly what we need moving forward." Amelia was taken aback. "I'm honored," she said, smiling. "I accept." Over the following weeks, Amelia embraced her new role with dedication. She worked closely with staff to foster a culture of openness and mutual respect. Training sessions were held to educate everyone on ethical standards and to encourage speaking up against any wrongdoing. One afternoon, while reviewing new patient care protocols, she received a visit from Detective Harris. "Just wanted to stop by and give you an update," he said. "The trial dates for Coleman and Abigail have been set. With the evidence we have, it's likely they'll face substantial prison time." "That's reassuring," Amelia said. "It's a relief to know they won't harm anyone else," Harris nodded. "Also, there's someone here to see you." He stepped aside to reveal Mr. Jonathan Reed's wife and daughter. Mrs. Reed approached Amelia, her eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and gratitude. "Mrs. Reed," Amelia said softly, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Mrs. Reed took her hands. "Please, don't apologize. I came to thank you. I learned about everything you did to try and save my husband and how you fought to expose those responsible for his death." Amelia felt a lump in her throat. "He was a good man. I'm sorry we couldn't do more." "You did more than anyone else," Mrs. Reed assured her. "In his memory, our family has decided to fund a new wing for the hospital dedicated to patient safety and ethics training. We'd be honored if you'd lead the initiative." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. "I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous." "It's the least we can do," Mrs. Reed said with a gentle smile. "Thank you for being his guardian angel." As they departed, Amelia stood for a moment, reflecting on how far things had come. The weight of the past events felt lighter, replaced by a sense of purpose and hope. That evening, she met Lisa at their favorite cafe. They reminisced about their journey, the challenges, the fears, and the ultimate victory. "Who would have thought we'd end up here?" Lisa mused, sipping her tea. "Not me," Amelia laughed softly, "but I'm grateful. We turned a terrible situation into a chance to make real change." Lisa raised her cup. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," Amelia echoed, clinking her cup against Lisa's. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the city, Amelia felt a profound peace. She had faced injustice, stood up against powerful forces, and emerged stronger. Her story was one of resilience and the unwavering belief that one person can make a difference. Amelia's journey teaches us that standing up for what's right is never easy, but it's always worth it. Through her courage and determination, she not only cleared her name but also brought about meaningful change that would protect countless others. Her story is a powerful reminder that integrity and resilience can overcome even the most daunting challenges. If Amelia's story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tales of heroism and hope.